Tell me more about the start of your career and when did the lawyer meet the tech industry, basically?
I was very passionate about intellectual property when I was in law school in particular. And I was very tempted by everything which intellectual property protected. And that means that everything which is related to progress. Right, so inventions, to invent something new, and, trademarks, which is something that you use in commerce and which is called the new law. And I really wanted to develop very much my knowledge in this field, in intellectual property. And one of the key moments in my professional development was when I first got my laptop. It was an Apple laptop. And I realized that, intellectual property is the one that protects design and inventions and everything that was inside that laptop. And that was the moment when I thought that I really wanted to develop more, to learn more about intellectual property in this field. And then I decided to study intellectual property in the United States because that was the source of everything, right? So that was the source of internet and so on. And I wanted to understand, the real thing, not something that I just read in a book, and just wanted to study very thoroughly. And after I finished my master's degree in intellectual property in the States, I came back to Romania. And I very much wanted to apply everything that I learned in the States. And that was the moment when I got in touch with a company who was receiving the first venture capital type of investment in Romania. And that company was Green Horse Games. And that was the moment when I knew that that is my opportunity to do exactly what I wanted, all my professional life. And I remember that I was very happy, and I was very happy to be part of actually a key person in the team that was actually instrumenting that investment within the law firm that I worked for that time. And I think that was the moment. That was the moment when I realized that as a lawyer, as a, let's say, tech lawyer, you are at the crossroads between companies who are seeking investments and investors who are seeking good companies to invest. And that was in 2009. And in that Christmas time, between 2009 and 2010, I was just thinking about this, that I am somehow in the middle between these two people, that somehow they are seeking each other. And I think because of the Christmas time, that, you didn't have too much to think about, just, be relaxed and so on. I realized that I can do more, that actually I can do more as a professional in this field rather than just pure legal advice, but actually contribute to this tech ecosystem, which was non-existent basically at that moment. And I realized that the basic thing that I can do is actually to put these people together in one place. And I remember that I searched a bit the internet and I couldn't find anything like that at all. And I said, it can't be possible. And then I found that something like this in the United States, that, I think Mark Zuckerberg was talking about something like this at that moment. And I said, we should do something like this here, in Romania. And I was very lucky that I got the support of the law firm that I was working for at that time. They were open to this idea. And that was in that year, I think in May or in June, it was the first time that we put together this event called Venture Connect, which was aiming at connecting, as the name says, investors and startups.
Going just a bit backwards from your story, what was about intellectual property that attracted you back then? I mean, it was a field that's evergreen in 2000 and 2010, but what was about this area that was interesting?
It was interesting to me because it was called the new area of law. And this type of law, inventions and trademarks and copyright, they were developed when the development of the society occurred, the industrial development of the society occurred. So that's why it's called new law. It's not the traditional type of law. It's something which protects the economy in general. And I think I was attracted about this new thing and realized that the inventions and intellectual property protects progress in general. And progress is very much related with technology. And I wanted to be close to that field, even though I'm not a technical person. So I just, I finished mathematics, physics, high school, but I haven't graduated, any technical university or something like that. But I was really attracted by the technology which enables progress. And I felt like if I can be in that space, that would be wonderful.
And you were part of the investment in Greenhouse Games. How was that relationship built and with Greenhouse Games, and maybe how the investments looked back then? Because we know how they look today, but back then it was a new thing.
Yeah, it was really different. So that particular investment, which was actually the first one before I co-founded Venture Connect, and I will talk about Venture Connect a little bit. So that was really very, very. It was exactly by the book, like how I learned in the States, and it was amazing for me, because I never thought I would really have I was hoping to have this opportunity in Romania, but I never knew that I could. And it was like the typical venture capital. It was a venture capital fund from Belgium, if I remember correctly, and my law firm was representing the fund, not the founder. And because I was the one who had knowledge about this, I was sent to the founder to talk to him and to do the due diligence. And that's when I met George Lemnaru, the founder of Greenhouse Games. And the first discussion was, I will never forget it. I really think he felt like I was the worst enemy that he could ever see in his life, because I kept asking questions, like, how do you protect the source code? Who works on the source code? Where is it stored? Do you have, procedures, confidentiality agreements, and everything that now seems to be like the basic stuff? At that moment, nobody knew about those things. And Georgia was like, why are you asking me all these questions? And I remember that the signing date was set like for Friday, for example, and I was in his office on Monday and asking all sorts of questions. And probably he was thinking like, why is she here? Why do I have to listen to all this? And we went through a process of discovering all the things which were not right, let's say, by those standards. And kind of fix them until Friday. So it was it was like a medicine process. It's like you have a pain, and then you get some medicine, and then in the end everything is fine. But it's a process. So it was a painful process. I also realized that I'm adding pressure to the founder, and I tried as much as possible to be resolving problems and not just finding issues. And at the end of that process, I think it was like exactly by the book, So we did everything right. We secured all intellectual property. We discussed everything. The fund was really happy, of course, that we had done all this, but it was a very hard work. 1 week to do everything which was supposed to, he was supposed to be doing, in years. And I remember, I think the investment was 2 million or something. So it was quite a good investment for that time. And I was also involved in the structuring of the transaction, in drafting the corporate documents and so on, which were protecting intellectual property and so on. So that was also, let's say, the pure legal part that I was involved in. But interestingly, George is my best friend ever since. He's one of my best and closest friends, actually. And I think at that moment he realized by the end of the process that it was something painful but needed, and he understood, my approach. So that was the feeling at that moment.
And before going to Venture Connect, have you been involved before the transaction with Greenhouse Games in other types of transactions which were not in the tech industry? And how different was maybe the Romanian business environment back then with what you have found in Greenhouse Games and startups, which was back then a very new field?
Yes, it was very different, and it still is very different. And I will tell you the main reason. So in Romania at that time, 2008, 2009, actually 2007, 2009, it was all about real estate investments. So everything had to do with real estate. Of course, there were classic, private equity transactions, but real estate was the key. In real estate, there is no attachment to the team, to the founder, to everything. It's just about, the the hard assets that you transact, and there is no emotion, no connection, nothing of the sort. You don't get those feelings that I talked about, when I was talking to George about it. So everything was very transactional. Pretty standard, I would say. There were many transactions going on. It was a very busy period. And when this type of transaction came along, I remember that my lawyer colleagues were like, what is this? What do you have to do here? And I was like, I know what to do here. So I really know what to do. Oh, yes, I know. So everything was different. I remember that a colleague asked me, why do you have to talk to George? Why do you have to go there and talk to him? I'm like, no, I really need, because in those transactions, you need to ask the history, right? You need to ask who was the person who created the intellectual property, who are there other people involved. So all that history matters. And, it's always easier to do it live and, not through an email and something like that. So it was very different. It was very different.
So we reach the Venture Connect moment in the ecosystem, an event and maybe a movement that you co-founded. What were the origins and the people involved in the event, and maybe the goal of it?
That was another very important moment. So as I mentioned, right after the transaction with the Green Horse Games, I felt like I just have been born, It's like, okay, so now this is great. And I was thinking over the Christmas, so this is interesting. So these people, they are looking for companies and these companies. And I thought that it's a good idea to put these people together. But at the same time, I was very aware that I didn't have any business experience, in the field. So I'm a lawyer by training. I'm very enthusiastic. I'm very, I want to contribute and so on. But I also realized that I don't have any credibility in the industry just by myself. I'm, Mary Andronic, I just want to organize an event. Please come to me. It would be, So I decided to reach out to the people who were the pillars of the industry at that moment. And I thought to myself, I will write them and they'll probably ignore the email and never respond to me ever. And what will I do? Because they will not respond to me. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. Even if they don't respond, I'm just going to do it. But the great part was that they all responded. So I wrote to Radu Georgescu at the moment. I said, good morning, my name is, I am this, I have this background. I just want to organize this event, this type of initiative actually. What do you think about it? And I never thought that he would reply. And I got the reply like one day later or something like that. I was amazed, like, oh, that's very interesting. Let's, meet and talk about it. Then I said, okay, I need, who else? It's a pillar in this industry. And it was Marius Ghena. I said, okay, I will write Marius also. Marius responded, and later I had a meeting with Marius, and Marius, in a very entrepreneurial way, he said, well, if you are actually doing it and not just talking about it, call me. So it was a very, call to action. I said, okay, I will do it and I will call you. And actually that happened. In this way, I created what was called the board of Venture Connect. I went to Orlando Nicoară, who was also a very known person, in the tech industry at that moment. I also had, later on, I had Peter Barta, who was also involved in the ecosystem, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think it was, and also Dragoș Rouă, who was at that moment a very well-known entrepreneur in the ecosystem, but he was very low profile. I mean, he was not very visible. Only if you would be in the industry, you would know about him, but he was an amazing person. And they all said yes. They all said yes at the moment. They said, yes, it's a good idea. It's a very good idea. Let's do it. And I felt that at that moment that everyone was willing to contribute. And I still have this feeling today. But at that moment, it was something which was never done before. And I think everyone realized that it's a good thing for the community. So this was how it all started. I was very, very, very honored, and I am to this day, about their faith, to to respond to me and to put this together.
Today, maybe we are accustomed with so many events for startups and technology. They're everywhere, smaller and bigger. But back then, Venture Connect was a new thing. And do you remember the first edition? How was it? How was the atmosphere? How many people were there? Who were there? Who was there?
Yeah, I remember. I will always remember that event. I think there were about 70, 80 people in total. And it was very different than what I had imagined. So in my mind, the event would be very, I don't know, sparkling, like people talking to each other, like you would see an event today. And we could barely select 10 startups to pitch. And we had like 50 people in the room. Interestingly, there were big names that we have today. For example, it was Dan Lupu from Early Bird. It was, who else was there? Credo Ventures. I mean, very, very big. We're just sitting there and, very silent. Nobody knew them, basically. They're not like visible. And we barely had 10 startups to pitch. And the pitches were, they could not stay within 7 minutes. And nobody asked any questions after the pitch. It was a total silence. And we had the event organized in 2 sessions. The first one was the pitches, and the second one, which in my imagination would have been, the core one, was the networking session, right? So it was when people talk to each other and, they discover who are you and, what fund. And at the second section, we had like a table for investors and table for entrepreneurs, and they never talked to each other at all. They didn't talk to each other. They were like sitting there, the entrepreneurs at their table and the investors at their table. And at the end of the event, they came to me and they said like, Mary, I don't know about this event, but no, there was no investor coming to me and talk to me. And the investors were like, I didn't have any interaction with the startups, like. And then we all realized, the board, and we realized that, wow, so there, in our imagination, people, were interacting and so on. And then we realized that we need to help the community even more and to explain to them what an event like this is. It's a networking event. It's an event where you as an entrepreneur go to the investor. And I know it sounds very, basic, but this is what we did. And we also added a session where we prepared the pitches one day before. So for the companies that were selected, we had a meeting one day before the pitch, and we went through their presentations, and they rehearsed with us, with the board, and they were able, so that they are able to present it in 7 minutes and so on. And I will never forget that I received an email from an entrepreneur who is very well known. He sent the email after such a session like this, and he said, I never thought that this would be possible in Romania, to get coached by Radu, Georgescu, and so on how to present my pitch. And that was really a very good moment. I realized that we're doing something good, and it's something valuable, for the community. I thought I'm going to frame that email.
You mentioned about some of the biggest names from the investment side that were there at the first event. And during the Venture Connect events, if you search the internet right now, you can find big companies from today. I mean, you can see companies listed on the stock exchange, yes, companies that exited, maybe companies that disappeared, but the entrepreneurs remained. So do you remember some of the companies that were somehow born there at the event? Not maybe born, but developed?
Yes, I can say, for example, BitNet Systems. BitNet Systems was a company that pitched at the second Venture Connect event. So we decided to organize this event in 2 sessions, one in the spring and one in the fall. And Venture Connect was, let's say, kind of an accelerator at that moment. So, for example, BitNet Systems, he got an investment from an angel investor. They pitched at our event. They didn't get the investment through our event, but a close friend had seen, press coverings about the event and called them and, discussed about an investment and so on. And interestingly enough, I have to mention, it's the beginner's luck. At the first event, we had an investment. So, so it was very, we are very proud of it, but of course it was kind of a beginner's luck. But yes, I do remember that. It was really something which helped companies to accelerate their development at that moment.
And you mentioned that the pitches were not so good at the first edition. And if you think today 7 minutes for a pitch is an eternity, and they are all maybe looking the same and entrepreneurs know how to do them. But where were the startups back then? I mean, what were they looking? Because it was a weird environment for a startup to develop. Romania in 2010, 2011. There were some examples. Radu from the Defender as successes, Marius Ghen, so on. But the idea of developing a tech startup in Romania was still weird.
Yes, it was very new, extremely new. Yes.
How were they? Their attitude, their maybe curiosity.
They were very reluctant to disclose information. They were extremely territorial with the information. I will say something really funny, and Marius knows it. There was an entrepreneur who said, "What? I don't want to disclose my idea. What if Marius Ghena will steal my idea?" And that was the level. So one other thing which we needed to add, of course, in our training sessions, was to explain to them that sure, you shouldn't disclose critical information, for example, from a legal standpoint, technical things that lead to an invention or things like that, of course. But it's not, usually investors don't need to know, the technical details. They just want to understand how, that business is going to grow and how are you going to make money and so on and so on. And that is not protected by intellectual property or stuff like that. So, but they were extremely territorial. So we had to convince them to expose, actually. But most of them, they didn't want to send the pitches. They were really said, no, if you want, I want to talk to Radu and explain to him, but I will not make a presentation. It was really hard. We had to convince them. So anyway, from my expectations to reality, it was like a huge gap. I thought that people would go crazy about discussing about this. And it was still, they were still very, very reluctant at that moment. And slowly they understood. And it was in time that also they got used to the fact that they disclosed something to the investors and nothing happened. Nobody stole their idea. Nobody implemented that idea. It's like slowly. But this was the level of, let's say, understanding at that moment.
How did the event grow during these years? From the first event, you mentioned that it was an event in spring and one in the fall?
Yes, in the fall, yes.
How did it evolve? And we're going to reach there. How did it end?
So the main person responsible for the growth of this event, I want to say, is Alexandra. Alexandra Pahomi is her name now, and Alexandra Dumitru was her name then. And I say this with my whole heart because, we all of us in the board, let's say the founder of these initiatives, we were busy people. We were doing this in addition to everything that we were doing every day. So at that moment, we realized that, look, somebody has to actually organize this thing to make it, to grow, to make it a more professional event. So we said we need to hire somebody to do this. By the way, the event was free, so it was never, so it was pure for the community. So we decided, and with the help of Peter Barta, who was helping us financially, we started looking for a person to help us. And we were very lucky to to meet Alexandra at that moment. Alexandra was a very junior person, but very enthusiastic, very passionate about this field also, and that was amazing because you wouldn't find people passionate about this field at that moment. It was very, I was the only crazy person in the room, and she was amazing. I will never forget, she participated in the board meetings. Imagine having, I don't know, being 22 years old and having Radu on your board and talking to you, and with that level of experience. She handled it very, very well and even more passionately. So she helped us grow the event a lot, and the event was growing because of her, because she put a lot of effort. And of course, all of us were contributing in our way. But she was, like the heart of it, to do everything right. So we did this with her help for 4 years, 2 events a year for 4 years. It was something which we never felt like it was tiring or something. It was rewarding in itself because we were contributing to the community. And after, I don't know, 3 years or something like that, other similar events started to happen, which was something that we wanted. And I remember that somebody said, look, this organization is copying your event and is doing the same. And I said, that's the idea. That was the idea. The idea was to spark the development of the ecosystem. You cannot have an exclusivity on the patent, on organizing an event. And that was not the point. The point was the more events we have, the more opportunities for investments we have. Everyone is going to be happy about it. And after 4 years, when we started this, I think we had a discussion in the board, and the conclusion was that its mission was accomplished, basically. So that was the mission of the event, and its mission was accomplished, and it was time to, perhaps think about something else, or, see in other ways we can contribute to the community. But I remember that by that time there were many events in Bucharest, also in Cluj, I think it started, events like this. So it was the right time to end it.
This is what I wanted to ask you, if it felt like mission completed at the end.
It was, I have to say, it was hard to make the decision because it was our way of contributing to the community and to stay in touch with the community. But it was also the right time. It really had its mission completed. This is what I wanted when I had this idea first, to try to accelerate and to put these people to start the wheels, and now the wheels were running.
Because you mentioned some of the people who were involved, and it's always a discussion in the startup ecosystem in any country about, I would put it like this, new money versus old money, or tech money versus traditional business money. Did you manage, all of you, to attract people who weren't in the tech ecosystem back then, weren't Radu, who had already a business, or Marius, or you working with intellectual property, who started to understand this environment?
Yes, actually, it was very interesting to discover. Now, when I look back, when I think back, actually, in our audience, there were already tech venture funds, which we didn't know exist, like I mentioned, Early Bird. Dan Lup was coming from Intel Capital. I think he was at Intel Capital at that moment. Andre from Credo Ventures, he was right there. And I remember, I will never forget, that the first event he said, I know what you're trying to do here. He was like the only one who, I understand what you're trying to do here. So they were already there. But we also had private equity funds, which were in the audience. And we also had at that moment, and in the years after 2010, investors coming from real estate, as I mentioned, because real estate was booming for quite a while until that period. And people in the real estate made money, and they were interested in how to invest the money, and they realized that this could be a pipeline to invest. And slowly, they kind of were attracted to the field. Now, I have to say that their mentality being a little bit different in investment, at the first time there was a little bit of a crash in mentalities, especially since they were used to do business in a different way. And I remember, for example, that we had an investor from the real estate investing in a tech company, and when you invest, you have some sort of projection of a business plan, right? And you aim that within 6 months you are going to do A, B, C, and D. And I don't know, by the end of those 6 months, that entrepreneur was, that company was like doing A, B, C, but not D, something like that. But anyway, it was on a good trajectory, but not quite there. And the investor has sent a formal letter coming from a lawyer informing the founder that you have not achieved, the milestones in our business plan, and it's the end of March, and how do you suggest we continue? It was a totally different mentality. And the founder was like, he came with the letter to me. It's like, Mary, what is this? It's like, sounds like a threat. It's like, because usually lawyers talk is kind of threatening. So it was a bit of it took some time before the wheels were adjusted between the two of them, let's say. But actually, more of the people came many people came from the real estate at that moment.
What do you think, looking back at those years, was the impact of Venture Connect for the ecosystem? I mean, of course, there were some startups. Events maybe would have happened some way or another, but Venture Connect was there. So what was the impact that maybe lasts until today?
Wow, that's a good question. I think in this, it's subjective, of course. It's my view of the things. I think it helped a lot in opening the gate for everything that was about to come. At the same time, I think it took us way too much time to get to where we are today. I mean, in my humble opinion, it should have developed faster than it did. And there are several reasons for this. And when I'm saying this, I'm thinking also about the investor community. I was hoping that investors would be more willing to invest more. At the same time, they were a bit reluctant, and there were just a few business angels at that moment, like a very few. And because of the lack, there's always this question, is it the lack of companies or the lack of money that is kind of stalling the ecosystem? And in my opinion, it was the lack of money. And that was dragged for a very long time. That was dragging for a very long time. I mean, too long, in my opinion. It could have been 5 years ago. Until the two venture funds that we have right now, Early Game Ventures and Gapminder, which were helping a lot. Until that time, people were struggling to get funding. Companies were still struggling to get funding. So it did everything it could at the moment. Perhaps it could have done more. It's always the case. But I think for that time, it was very good that it came and happened. It's very true that it was just that initiative. We didn't have other help. It was a voluntary initiative. So just keep in mind that it was something which we did with our spare time, so-called spare time. And this was the most we could do at that moment.
Why do you think that it took so much time for the investment environment in Romania to crystallize to what it is today, with more funds for, pre-seed, for seed, maybe not for Series A still?
Not so much. Yeah.
Not so much.
Yeah.
Why did it took so long? What was the cause during those years?
Yeah, it's really a good question. I think I see two reasons. One is one which is related to the public funding in general. So part of the funds that are included in those two venture capital funds that we are talking about were part of EU funds and public funds, and somehow those funds reached Romania later than in Bulgaria, for example. Mm-hmm. So that is one cause, and I think that's really important because that also helps, kind of when you have something risky, if somebody else is taking the risk with you, then it's easier for you. You're not so reluctant to put your own money into that. So that is really helpful. And I think the other reason is that we needed to build the ecosystem, and it takes, and for me it's also hard to accept because I'm usually a bit less patient, impatient, let's say, just a little bit. I want things to happen a bit faster. But I think that's the real time to build something, and it takes some time to build something. And we also had to build the money of those people that were investing, right? So they were making money at the time. Now, for example, we have investors from the IT sector, right? So we have IT entrepreneurs who have made exits also. So they were building also at that time. So it was a time to develop, to grow on all fronts. Now, for example, nowadays, I mean, I'm working on exits right now. So, things which happen just one in 2 years you had in, at those times. So it was just a time. And unfortunately, because of the lack of public funding, I think when the public funding came in, you could see like a milestone, an important milestone in the ecosystem.
It was maybe a case of those people who you've met at Venture Connect events and started to build the startups, maybe just stopped talking and meeting and started working on the startup. Yes. So those were the gap years.
Exactly.
Other founders would come and meet and develop.
Yes, and it was a time to build and a time to learn, and really this is how it was. I felt like it was a time for all of us to learn and to grow. But I will tell you that from the very first moment that we had Venture Connect until today, I never stopped working on tech transactions. So somehow, and tech related work, let's say, everything. So somehow the ball was, started to roll at that time, even though the results were not so visible yet, I would say.
This is what I wanted to ask. Even if Venture Connect was a spare time activity for all of you, what happened after Venture Connect for you in particular?
So for me, it was the moment when I started to do everything that I like professionally, and this is what I mentioned. I continued to do tech work, which I never done before at all. So before Green Horse Games, not at all. Green Horse Games, the first work tech related, and since then only tech related. So somehow the ecosystem was growing. There were transactions which were smaller in size, like for example, 50,000 euros was a huge number at that moment. If you would secure an investment of 50,000 euros, you would be very well. Those are small transactions if you look at those, nowadays, but they were happening. And somehow there was also, I remember that we had, for a brief period of time, we had an initiative which was called Venture Mentoring, because, we were trying to contribute from both sides, right? From investment and also from knowledge perspective. And I think in the same year, I think also How to Web started, which was also an event aimed at the tech ecosystem. And that also helped a lot because they were on the how-to side, right? They were, trying to contribute from this perspective as well. They had very well-known entrepreneurs coming and speaking and sharing, their practices. So we realized that perhaps it was not too much we can do on the investor side because that's, limited to money. So we had to have people with money. But we can develop on the other skills, on the business side skills. So we did that. So I was only doing tech-related work since then, basically.
You mentioned the fact that when the public funding came, things developed faster. And for some years, we used to look at Bulgaria with envy, not to mention Poland, which was the example that we took here in Central and Eastern Europe. So if you were to describe basically not what's particular about the Romanian ecosystem, maybe it's the same as other countries, but what are some of the characteristics of the Romanian ecosystem, if you would describe them to someone else, someone who doesn't know about the tech startups in Romania?
I would say that entrepreneurs and founders are very passionate about it. They have grit and they have passion and they have drive. They lack, unfortunately, still some business-related skills. And when I say business, I'm not necessarily talking about sales, but I'm talking about business mentality, right? So business mentality means, how do I make money out of this? Of course, it's my baby, it's my company, it's my people, my team. So everything which is, as I said, different from real estate, for example, where it's not about team and everything. But still, how do I make money out of this? Because traditionally, the tech industry starts from a non-money related idea, right? In general, and not idea, but the intent, right? So I'm trying to contribute to something. I remember, for example, that even me as a lawyer, after I had Venture Connect, I had a founder coming and asking me, so what is your rate for tech startups and how do you work? What is your, and I never thought about it. All I wanted was, I thought about contributing. And I think this is how usually starts. So I want to solve this problem. I want to contribute to this. I want to do that. And then after you start building, then you're like, okay, so how do I make money out of it? I don't know. So I see a lot of companies reaching this stage where they don't really have a, so-called business model or business mentality. Now, why the causes of this are, multiple, and we can discuss about it. But I think this is what it kind of lacks in our environment. On the good side, I think they have great values. And one of the things which attracts me to this industry is the value of the values that people have. Founders like George, like Radu, like Marius, they're really wonderful people to work with. Their values transcend everything, and you can see that. So that is one that is great. That is something which you don't find easily, I would say, in other ecosystems. But you need to double that, with the business mentality. And I think that's why it takes us a bit longer. Now, it seems like, I don't know, sometimes, the grass is greener on the other side as well. So you feel like, I don't know, in other ecosystems is better. I wouldn't be so sure. I would not leave this ecosystem, to be honest. I mean, I really would not leave it because I think it has still a lot of potential. And I think as long as you have room to learn, I think that's good. That's a great spot to be in.
How did you mix the lawyer part of it with the investment side of your career? Of course, being connected to the Venture Connect and to transactions, it was a natural step. How did you mix those? You had an unfair advantage of knowing the law side.
Yes, you are right. Actually, it's a bit difficult for me sometimes to explain to my colleague lawyers that I also have this know-how about, let's say, venture path of a company. Interestingly, people call me more for this than for pure law. Of course, lawyering is also, profession. But I feel like I can contribute even more with the experience I got over the years. And I'm very honored to be, an advisor in companies that feel that there is a value that I can add in the fact that I have been involved in this from the very beginning. And it's a natural mix, actually. It's very natural. On the same time, I think lawyers are trained, by training, they are risk adverse. They need to find issues, to make sure that they cover everything. But for me, it feels like it's a natural thing to also think about investment, about risk. It kind of balances me, So it's a wonderful place to be.
You are involved right now you're still involved in the ecosystem, of course. You're involved with Brava Angels. How?
And with Tech Angels.
And with Tech Angels. How do you see the ecosystem right now from this perspective of new startups developing? Because you are talking with very early stage startups, startups.
Yeah. Yeah, they usually come to me very early. That's where I get them. And it's very, very nice and interesting to be at that spot. It's a good question. Well, definitely pitches are better than they were in 2010. There's still room for improvement, but I think it's different than at that moment. But to be honest, the problems are the same. I don't feel like we have made a huge step in the nature of the problems that we have. There are more startups and more investors, obviously, and also some wonderful examples like UiPath, adding to the early ones of Radu Marius. But I still think the founders still need this business mentality. Of course, they're not so afraid to open up and to discuss about their companies, but they still need this this business mentality. I think what we have managed to do is to grow the companies until the Series A. You mentioned that, I mentioned that we don't have Series A too much. Series A when the company really grows, right? So when you have reached that stage where we can have a cross-border growth, that is still lacking a lot. And I guess I'm hoping that, as I said, since I was busy since 2010 until now with only tech, even if I don't see it like, in a very visible way, I think things are cooking right now. So it's a level that we don't realize because we are still here every day. We are involved in this every day. But it's the same things. And of course, now with the new context, it's a bit, it's even a bit harder for startups to raise money right now in this context.
You mentioned about the need to look outside the borders for startups. So startup is essential in order to grow. Startups from Romania are kind of forced to look outside. Romania is a medium-sized country,
right,
but not a market, not a real market for a startup. Maybe it can be a test market. Why do we still have this issue of starting here and going global in the end? Because in the end we are forced.
This is the most frequent question I get from founders who call me and ask me, do you know somebody that can help me with going abroad in different jurisdictions? This is the most frequent question I get. Depends, I guess it depends, or it is related also with the product and the company that you are founding, right? So you need to, and I think that was, for example, in one of the Venture Connect events, we had the company addressing only the Romanian market. I remember very clearly. and nobody was interested in that company, unfortunately. I mean, it was pretty hard, for the founder. And they even said, so you're just for the Romania, right? So you want to do this only for Romania? I said, yes, I want to do this, And they were like, okay, I'm not interested, but clearly saying that, which looks harsh, when on the face of it, but it's the truth, basically, because you don't have enough market to go there. I think the part of the answer is that we still have so much to resolve here in Romania that we are still thinking locally. We are, we're like, it's still, and even with this openness and, internet connection, social media that connects us with everything, still we are still thinking about problems that we have here. So if our problems are more related to us, then it's very hard to export those, let's say, the solutions that we find to those problems to other countries and to other markets, basically. So it is hard. You have to think of a product which transcends the country from the very beginning. And I remember that I had this discussion with Vladimir Wane, who is also one of very well-known founders in Romania. And I remember that he told me, your product needs to have nothing to do with the Romanian market. It's like a, statement. So if you start like this, then you have a chance to go, in more markets. So I think this is where probably the main point is.
What's next for the Romanian ecosystem and Romanian startups in general? You mentioned some of the challenges, issues that have to be resolved. But what's next, in your opinion? Develop more at the grassroots. So we still need more, even though we have. I mentioned the 2 funds. They're still enough. We need more than that. We need like when you wet the field, you need to do it consistently and to have the land pretty wet. That's what we need to have, because if you have a larger base to grow, then you have more opportunities for more companies to grow, and that's let's say the base layer. And in theory, it's easy to say, but it's hard to. We need Series A transactions. We need Series A, which means that we need more companies to reach that level when they get to cross border, and also there are foreign funds who have invested in Romania. I know I didn't mention that, but there are foreign funds who are interested, and you would be amazed of hearing that a well-known venture fund from UK has invested in a company in, I don't know, in Brașov or in places where perhaps the ecosystem is not so well developed. So things are happening, but there is room for more, definitely. So we still have a lot of work to do. What do you think can be the position of the Romanian ecosystem when putting it in the bigger European ecosystem or global ecosystem? Realistically, what can we be, basically? Because we passed the nice titles of the Silicon Valley of Europe, of Berlin, of Eastern Europe, whatever. What can we be, realistically? Yeah, that's a good question. and that's a very good question, actually, because that's what we mentioned, that you need to think, bigger, in a bigger picture. Well, when we founded Venture Connect, we thought that we would be the main point, the main place where tech ecosystem in Eastern Europe would be. We are not there. I don't think it's the time has passed. I think we still can be in that place. I still think so. It depends again on the forces, right? I mean, even if you look at how we started, nobody pushed us to do that, right? So it was not something which came and said, you have to do this, this, and that. And I remember that a funny thing, that every Venture Connect event, there was somebody from our government and somebody from the presidency. So they were, and I remember that at one of the events, they asked us, how can we help you?
So there was no, it was something which the ecosystem developed by itself. And I still think we can be there. If the public funding would be helping more than it does, I think that would help us make a bigger step, and we can become that let's say central point in Eastern Europe that you know about. I never heard any foreigner, any investor coming to Romania and not liking it and not liking the founders or the ecosystem, and they all come with pleasure here and discover, and they're happy, they're impressed, about what they discover. So there's still time for that.
Why should technology and tech startups be a main point of investments from public funding? Because there are sometimes talks. Why should we advantage more the tech ecosystem and not any other industry in Romania?
I guess there is a sort of misconception that venture world and tech companies are like, I don't know how they're making money on, because they're just numbers and it's a fluff and it's not something for real, and it's not. So this is at least the sometimes you hear this this not real hard assets, hard economy, and so, which is also important. So to make that clear. But the reason for me has always been the same. It's like, this enables progress in an economy. How can you not do it? I mean, the question is, why would you not do it? Because this is what enables progress in all societies across the world, and in ours as well. So you like when you touch something and it happens and it talks to, that's technology. So how can you not invest in that? Sure, if you are faced with the challenge of not having enough money and trying to portion them, okay, that I can understand the let's say the discussion about it. But if this if this protects progress and enables progress, I think that it's like do you want to invest in your future? Yes, I mean, like, the nature itself invests in future, right? So it's something which is, at least in my mind, it's relatively easy to understand. But I think for this you need also to have this vision, right? To have this idea that you want to build a future, you want to contribute to the future. And if it comes from that background, then I think the answer is easy. If it comes from a more why are you doing there? Something fishy or something, then of course, it becomes a difficult decision to make.
For some time, when we were talking about the Romanian ecosystem, you mentioned some names, and when I think about it, sometimes seemed like a boys' club. You were there, maybe Carmen Sebe connected with the ecosystem. Alexandra, but there were few names. There are more right now. But how do you see this target of involving female founders, female investors more in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to have them. It's really, really wonderful. And I have to say that I'm really proud that in our ecosystem, I never felt any discomfort or any perception or anything related to being a female founder, or being. So everything was really open. But at the same time, there were a few women, and there still are a few women in this industry. And for example, I remember that I went to a company, an IT development company, and the person who was the operational manager, she was a woman, and everyone was, there were only boys in the company. And when she opened the door and she saw me, she was so happy. I remember her eyes were sparkling, like she's like, oh, a woman coming to us, She was like, so it was, yeah. So that was the level of, of how things were there. Very, very few women, and I think it's wonderful that this opens up to more, the environment is opening up to, this is balancing the ecosystem, and I think it's good. I think this is how you make wise decisions, right? When you have a balance. And from the statistic that I read, with Brava Angels, interestingly enough, women tend to have more successful investments than men at some point, in certain areas, and they tend to nurture more. They tend to, to contribute more in a different way. Men are more prone to risk. They risk more. They want more, which is also a good thing. So I think it's really bringing more to the table, basically. Right, so it's bringing more to the. Why not? Why not doing it? It's like more skills, more knowledge, more money, and I was very happy to see that this was also developing and growing.
Why are not you are involved in the ecosystem for 15 years?
Yes, somehow? Something like that. Yes.
Why are you not bored yet?
I'm not bored, and I will never be bored in this ecosystem because I never had two companies the same. Every company, they tend to have the same issues, as I mentioned, but they're different. And with every company, I need to understand their business model, how they want to grow, what their path is, what their pain is sometimes. And this is different from every company to every company. So I have such a variety, and sometimes it is very challenging. There are companies who act in certain technical fields that I have to understand and to read and to have the founder explain to me how it works, and try to, because this is how I also do legal advice. I never cannot just give like surgical legal advice like that. I need to understand what drives the business and how can I help actually with the legal solutions to make the business grow. And you cannot get bored when you have such a variety of things. It's actually tiring.
And from your lawyer perspective, what's still lacking in the bureaucracy area of doing business in tech in Romania, of growing a startup? I'm not even saying that we should keep startups here in Romania, because it would be impossible for an UiPath to be listed on a stock exchange in the US. But what's still lacking from a judiciary point of view?
Nothing has changed since 2010. So there is no, within the legal field, nothing significant has changed, unfortunately. So in terms of my pure legal work, I do exactly the same things I'm doing since 2010. There is still a limit in the understanding of intellectual property in the tech field. So I have to explain again and again and again, which for me is not tiring, but it's just an observation that I still need to do this for quite some time. I can speak for this, about this for hours. So and on the business side, I think now there are some discussions about trying to improve the business law, the company's law in terms of, how you run a business. Can it be more startup friendly, to implement, for example, concepts like convertible loans and, boards and things like that. Those are still the same as they were in 2010. I think the will is there, but it's never a priority. Somehow it never reached that level of high priority on the, Parliament's list or government list. But I will say this is not a showstopper for the investment or investors. And for example, in 2010, 12, there were discussions about not having intellectual property in Romania, transferring intellectual property from Romania to a different jurisdiction. And that investors would never invest in a Romanian company who owns the intellectual property. Well, guess what? In 2014, UiPath got an investment and, intellectual property was shared, So the things have evolved in terms of how we do business, how we structure the business. From a pure legal perspective, the laws are the same. So, but it's not something which would ever stop someone from investing. The only thing that it's important for investor is if the intellectual property is indeed secured, right, secured in the company. In Romania, if you have a good lawyer who can vouch for that and say, look, I worked with this law firm and we have this all secured. If you have a really interesting business case, that which is going to be helpful for an investor, not so much the fact that you have, I don't know, a limited liability company or you have. So those are things that you can solve and you can work with.